So grateful to be here around so many smart people, so many things I've learned in the other sessions. It's kind of made me feel a little overwhelmed, I guess. So hopefully this session is a little lighter. We're not going to be going into anything too deep. I really want to talk really high level about Native, React Native, and Flutter, and some of the main points on each of those, and then the process that I use to decide which one to use on each project. So just as a quick introduction, my name is Barlow Tucker. I've been writing code for a long time. The most important thing on this slide is pertaining to this talk is actually the last one. My wife and I love to watch BYU football. I don't know, is anyone in here like to watch college football? A couple? Awesome, perfect. I'm going to have a little bit of participation from you guys in this next step, because I want to do a quick analogy that relates college football to React Native and Flutter and native development. So, as we all know, BYU is the best football team out there. We heard out here, there's some laughs. Who is that? So who's your team?
Florida Gators.
Florida Gators, all right. So Florida Gators back here, was there another team?
Michigan Wolverines.
The Wolverines, and what was that? The Trojans, all right. Trojans, BYU played the Trojans this year. That was a good game. So in Utah, there's a lot of talk between BYU versus the Utah Utes. And the Utah Utes, I don't know if you guys have been watching the college football playoffs, but they're up there like number 6 or something. And people talking about how great they are. So the question is, why would I like BYU if Utah is playing better this season? There's a lot of arguments. You go back and forth, talk about which college football team is the best. Is it the Wolverines, the Trojans? Is it the Gators? And really, it doesn't have a lot to do with how good the football team is. Sometimes it does. For me, BYU football is more about, that's where I went to school. That's where I met my wife. That's where the community that I grew up in, I love to watch it. I love to watch the players. So the goals for me of which team I root for depend on those things, right? At the same time, I'm kind of rooting for the Utes because, unfortunately, BYU has not had a season that puts them in the top 10 playoff contentions. So I root for the Utes because I think that they might make it into the top 4 somehow. We'll see. He shakes his head no. But the point is, it varies depending on what your goals are for the platform. I love BYU. If they're playing the Utes, I'm always rooting for BYU. But if they're not playing, then maybe I can root for the Utes too. So it's a very, very similar thing in these platforms. You get people who love React Native, and you talk to them, and they're like, you shouldn't use anything else. React Native is the only platform you should use from now on. Same thing with Flutter. People are so excited about it. It's awesome. Or native, and you should only write your apps in native. I actually have my own opinion of what I prefer. I'm not going to share that. I'm not going to tell you guys what I use on most of my projects because that's not what this talk's about. It's really about how do you find what's right for each project. So when I first started doing app development, this is way back, iOS was brand new, Android was brand new, and I get put onto this team and we're building out this platform for this mobile app. And we think, well, how do we build it? Do we write native? At the time, one of the other platforms was PhoneGap. Have any of you used PhoneGap? A couple, yeah. You had Unity, C++, C, and as the platform continued to mature, now we have things like Xamarin, React Native, Kotlin Native, Flutter, Swift, Web. There's just so much you can do, and so it left me and my team kind of feeling like the lady in this GIF. What in the world is going on? How do we even know what we should jump into? And for us at the time, for everybody really, building mobile apps was new. So we had to decide, are we going to learn Objective-C and Java, or are we going to jump into something like PhoneGap? So it was a really hard decision for us. We didn't know where to go. So we started digging in, and the funny thing is I thought that once I got into this is how I'm building mobile apps, I would be able to reuse that for each project that came along. But I just joined back in May. I just joined a company called Route and started building out their mobile platform, and we came across the same question. How are we going to build this app? What's the right solution for us? So over time, I've come up with my own way to decide. So we're going to talk a little bit about each of these platforms, some of the pros and cons of each, and then I'm going to dig into the way that I make decisions for each platform, because each one will have a different set of goals, just like in our college football example, right? I root for BYU if it's anything except, I'll root for the Utes sometimes, maybe. Okay, so jumping into React Native. Some of the pros of React Native. It's easy to learn if you know, especially if you know JavaScript. There's tons of resources out there. Lots of libraries, probably too many. If you've ever looked in the node modules folder, there's lots of libraries. You have reusable components that you can quickly drop into different screens. And it has hot reloading, so as you're writing your code, it just shows up on the device. It's really fast. It's pretty awesome. Some of the cons. JavaScript is not type safe without additional tools. And so it's really easy to get into a project quickly and think, oh yeah, I'm going to add TypeScript later. And then before you know it, you've got this code that's just a mess, and it's not scalable. There's lots of different flavors. By that I mean there's so many different ways to do it. And if you do a quick Google search, you'll find that that's true. There can be performance issues. And if anyone's done React Native and had to deal with bridging, especially, I don't know, for me on Android, it's even worse than on iOS. Bridging React Native on Android can be a huge challenge. And then the other one is debugging. If you've done React Native, you've seen the red screen of death. It comes up and it doesn't give you any or hardly any context as to what's going on. Jumping into Flutter, some of the pros. Flutter is type safe, so it's written in Dart. Supported by Google. Also has reusable components. Has a very fast layout engine. Also has hot reloading, just like React Native does. Some of the cons, and for me the biggest one is that it's such a young platform. I went to a session earlier today and he mentioned, hey, this is all stable theoretically. That's kind of the story of Flutter right now. Very young platform, has a ton of potential, and given another couple of years, I think it will be a lot more stable. You still need to deal with bridging to the native platform. And there's not a lot of devs with experience in Flutter. So as you're building out a team, definitely something to consider. And then native, either Android or iOS native apps. Some of the pros, you can get better performance, right? So React Native and Flutter, their benchmark is as good as native. So by native, you get that out of the box, assuming that you are conscious of it and you're writing your code well. You will always have native, well, I guess not always, but again, if you do it right, you'll have native feel in your app. Support by the platforms, so that would be from Google and Apple. A lot of community support, and you can quickly add new OS features. So as Apple or Google drops a new version of the OS, you can quickly jump in and add that without having to wait for the third party to add support for whatever that new library is. Some of the cons, sharing code, if you're not using one of these other platforms, sharing code between the platforms, iOS to Android, can be very challenging. There's a steep learning curve, and it can be expensive. So having to hire 2 separate devs to build on each platform, unless you happen to find somebody who can do both, and if you do, they're probably not cheap. So it can be expensive to do this. And so if you're at a small company, maybe building native is not going to be the right solution for you. So we're going to dive into how do you decide which of these platforms is going to be best. Some of these will seem fairly obvious, but for me, it took a lot of time working through this over and over to really understand it, I guess. So hopefully these things will help someone out there as you try to decide. But the first one is write down the goals for your app. What is it that you want your app to do? And these can include things like performance, speed of development. Do you want it to have a native feel? Or are your goals, we want to be able to get devs up quickly. We want to have a lot of code share across platforms. Decide on what your goals for the platform are. And then the most important step is write it down. And that's important because goals change or can change over time. But there's something about writing it down that helps solidify it in your mind of this is what we want this platform to be. So sit down with your team, whoever ends up making the decision, whoever the stakeholders are, and write down the goals for your app. The second step is to do your research. So the research part, there's tons of information out there. Definitely look online. You'll find articles on why you should never use React Native. You'll find articles on why you should always use React Native. And you'll find that for each of the platforms. So it's important that you look for articles that state each side of the argument if you want to understand the whole picture. Try to understand why would somebody suggest you never use a platform? What are the real drawbacks at the core of that article? And the same thing for the reasons to use it. The other thing that I find is really helpful is reaching out to devs who have actually done it, right? So if you know someone at Airbnb that has done React Native and then pulled out, see if you can talk to them. Go buy them lunch, sit down, and ask, what was the experience? There's a lot that you can gain from that, and I would just take notes and write everything down. Everything that you learn from people as you talk to them about the different platforms and the challenges that they ran into. The more you do this, you'll start noticing patterns throughout the conversations of people mentioning things like, oh, I ran into this performance issue in a table list. And so as you start gathering these notes, stuff will start to stick out that will be important as you make your decision. The next step is to prototype and measure. So I wrote an app, and I have the code. I'll send you, there's a link on the last slide to a GitHub repository. The same app that's written in React Native and it's written in Flutter. I didn't do native, so I'll try to, maybe I can add that over the weekend. But the app is super simple. It just shows, it pulls a list of images from Unsplash, and it displays them in a list. But the point is that you'll want to find a way to prototype something similar to what you're building. So in this example, if I was building an app that was going to display lists of photos, something maybe a competitor to Instagram, then I would want to prototype something simple, don't go too deep, but something simple that shows some of the core goals that I have for my project, and then prototype it in each of the languages. They're all fairly simple to get a project started in, and so you should be able to jump in, find these resources, and prototype. So in the app that I wrote, this is the code for the React Native version. I went for a very simple version, right? So this may not be the best example of code quality or commenting or even separating things out into separate files. But I wanted to get something I could fit on one slide that built that app that we saw on the previous screen. So for React Native, you build these components. You have your photo items, photo list. Those are components that can be reused on multiple screens. And you display that in a list. This little bit of code built that app. And there's also, I guess, a little bit of network code that's not in here. That is also in the repository that I'll share with you. So it pulls the photos, it displays it in a list, you scroll through them. The Flutter version is a little bit longer. In fact, I had to cut some stuff out. It won't work with just this. There's some boilerplate that you'll need. Again, that's in the repository. But again, this is a sample of that exact same app in Flutter, displays the exact same list of photos from Unsplash. Some of the nice things about this is the way they build in these widgets. So it's very similar to the React Native components, that these widgets, they can be reused across components. And it's all built in these different structures you can find on the Flutter website that will tell you some of the layouts that come built in. So it's really nice that you can build these components that are easily reusable in Dart. Okay, so down to the next step. Once you've done your prototyping, you've measured your prototype against the goals, and that's important. Once you get your prototypes, run it through some of the instruments that you have that can measure load time. It measures how much memory you're using, CPU usage. Some of the things that might be important that you wrote down in your goals for the app, you'll want to measure your prototype against and see how does it perform. Understanding that it's just a prototype and it's definitely not going to be as complex as your full app. So this next step is you take all that information and now you need to separate fact from opinion. The one thing I put on here I hear all the time is using, and you can fill in the blank for any of the platforms because they all say it, using React Native removes a whole class of bugs, right? That sounds like a fact. Like, oh yeah, if you write code this way, you're getting rid of a whole class of bugs that are impossible to write now. The reason I say that isn't a fact and more of an opinion is that it's implying that the class of bugs that it removes is better than the class of bugs that it introduces. Because every platform and every way you write your code, whatever your style is or design patterns, it all comes with its own baggage. So saying that if you write in whatever platform and your app's not going to have bugs anymore, that's just not true. At least it's not been my experience. So sit down and try to find a way to boil it down to the facts for each platform. And again, for me, that comes from once you get enough data, you start finding those strings that run through all of the articles, the people you've talked to, your prototype, and you say, you know what, this is something that I feel confident we can build our app on. And then the last one is you write down the results of what you found. So you want to write down, focus on the facts that align with your goals for the platform. I found if you create a spreadsheet and you can give a score to each value, like for each of your goals, say performance 1 through 10, and you have a way to score each of the platforms, and you give it a goal or a score and have it total it up at the end, you'll have at the end a pretty clear picture of this is going to be the right thing for us for this app right now. And I guess that's another important point to make. Just because you find a solution that's good for right now, that doesn't mean you have to stick with it. It might be the right solution for now because of where you're at as a company. And maybe 6 months from now, it's time to reevaluate. And you go through these steps again and see if the platform you chose still aligns with your project goals. And then the last point is make sure that you share your results with others. Write a quick blog post, share it with everybody because there's other people who are going through the exact same thing and they want to know what you found in your prototyping and in your research. And the more you do that, you help other people find the right solution for their platform. So just in summary, you write down the goals for your app, do your research, prototype and measure, separate fact from opinion, and write down the results. Here's a couple of links. The GitHub repository at the top, that will have the Flutter code and React Native code that you saw here. I didn't include the whole project. It's just the networking code and basically the code that you saw here. If you start a new project in one of those platforms, you just drop that code in and it should just compile and work. Oh, you'll have to set up your own key for Unsplash as well. But, and then if you have any questions, feel free to connect on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever. Come up, if any of you are interested in what we ended up writing our app in, come up afterwards and I'd love to chat about it with you and share what we found. That's it. Thank you.